Here we go. Let's do number 19. Did I say 18 earlier? I did. I think I said 18. Ready?
19 is a City Council update on accessory dwelling unit program.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and
sorry to keep you so late.
Honorable Council. I feel like I'm the best picture nominee here. They're saving the best for last. Anyway, it's with my pleasure that I'm here to provide you with an update on the accessory dwelling unit streamlining program. As you all know, back in February, staff was directed by Council to come up with some ideas and options and actions to further incentivize the development of ADUs in the city. And as you can see in this slide here, this is just a little bit of background defining what an ADU is, which is an attached or detached complete independent living unit located on the same lot as a single-family residence. As I'm sure the Council is well aware, state law provides significant incentives to develop ADUs, and while at the same time actually preempting much local zoning control as well. ADU law has actually been on the books since 1982. It's when the first laws were passed by the state, and there were a couple of subsequent laws, one in 2003 that essentially mandated that any ADU approved be done so in a non-discretionary fashion. In the past, prior to that, many cities required conditional use permits or didn't allow them at all for ADUs, and that changed in 2003. There was also some significant legislation passed in 2007 that had to do with some of the definitions that were involved, provided significant parking relief, and all told, those actions served to significantly incentivize the number of ADUs being built. And, you know, as with most other cities in California, since 2007 in particular, 2017, I'm sorry, there's been a significant uptick in the number of ADUs that we've seen. This slide shows permit volume over the years, and you can see following that legislation in 2017 that I mentioned, there was a significant increase in the number of ADUs permitted here locally. And as you can see in that last row, year to date, and that's through the end of April, we've had 14, which gets us on track for slightly more than the 40 we see up there right now. However, we believe that through this incentive program and streamlining program that I'm about to share with you, we're going to see that number significantly jump, most likely beyond 50 for this calendar year. So what Council asked us to take a look at were essentially 4 different elements here. One of them was looking at expedited reviews, what we could do to reduce our fees, come up with some ADU marketing material, and then also along with that develop a marketing campaign. And I'll be speaking about each of those in the following slides. As far as the expedited reviews go, I'm pleased to announce that we are in fact now meeting Council's direction, which was a 30-day review for non-coastal ADUs and a 60-day review for coastal ADUs. And this slide here shows what our turnaround times look like now. It did require some tweaking to get to the goal, but we have a really stellar building code, is very a very stellar building staff who's very focused on customer service, and they committed to shortening some of their review timeframes to get us where we're at. One thing I do want to point out is these days here that are shown on the slide, which get us to the 30 and 60 days, really account for the time that the plans are in staff's possession here at the city, not necessarily the overall process, because oftentimes what happens is there's an initial review, and when the plans get back to the applicant, how long they stay with the applicant is kind of beyond our control. But the time that they're in our hands, we're committed to doing an initial review within 14 calendar days, which typically translates into 10 business days. And then any resubmittals will turn around in 7 calendar days, which often translates into 5 business days as well. Unfortunately, in the coastal zone, things need to stretch out because of the fact that there is some additional notification required. And certainly if an item happens to get appealed in the coastal zone, then unfortunately all bets are off at that time, because that can sometimes drag out for months. But I think, you know, the good news here is that we are able to meet, and we are actually now doing that in practice, meeting those 30 and 60-day timeframes. One of the other things that we were asked to look at were whether or not there were any additional fee incentives. As you'll see in some of the following slides, as we did some additional analysis and took a look at what some of our other surrounding cities are doing, we're actually doing quite a bit more already than quite a few cities out there, and I'll get into a little bit of that detail. Currently, right now, the fees that we do collect are plan check fees, permit and inspection fees. We do have a general plan surcharge that we apply to all building permits. We have a technology surcharge that we apply to all building permits. And then school district fees are still collected as well by the local school districts. Those are external agencies. But we do need to show, or the applicants need to show, proof of payment before permits are issued on those. And I have a more detailed table that shows what those charges typically look like. And you'll see that in an upcoming slide. The fees that we currently waive are actually development impact fees, and those are things like traffic signal thoroughfare fees, park fees, public facility fees, and most recently there was some significant movement on the part of SANDAG to clarify that cities are in fact allowed to waive their arterial highway fee, which is a big deal. That was typically about $2,000 or a little bit more than $2,000 on a typical permit. So that was a big deal. So as soon as we got word from SANDAG that we were able to no longer charge that fee, we immediately stopped charging that fee. So good news there. These development impact fees actually were waived officially by the city in 2017 through some language that was added in an ordinance. When we updated our ordinance to reflect the legislative changes in 2017, we added some language to the ordinance that essentially comes to the conclusion that for the purposes of collecting development impact fees, ADUs are not considered to be new residential units. So that's a big deal, and you'll see that on this next slide here. So in looking at and approaching this issue, we took a look at several ADUs that had been recently permitted and took a look at the fees that were collected and the fees that were waived. And so for the example that I'm sharing tonight, it's kind of a middle-of-the-road ADUs. They generally range in size anywhere from 600 feet up to 1,200 feet, so this is probably more like a mid-sized ADU. And what this slide shows is really by waiving by implementing our current practice of waiving our development impact fees, which are those fees up here on the left column, you'll see that's about a $10,000 break that ADUs currently get as what would normally be charged for a new residential unit. And in the meantime, those fees that we still collect, which I mentioned in one of the previous slides, really is about almost an equal amount. And it's kind of funny if you take a look, and I looked at several examples, and it across the board, it's about a 50-50 split in terms of the break that people get right now in development impact fees. So in this case here, we would still be collecting $10,726. However, it's important to note that 3,372 of those are school district fees. So in reality, we're collecting about $7,000 in local fees right now on a typical ADU. It's probably important to mention as well that in doing research, and I'll talk a little bit about that in an upcoming slide, but it's not uncommon for cities to waive development impact fees. There are a few cities in the county that are doing that, including the county itself. What is more rare is for some cities to waive the plan check and inspection fees, and because those fees are generally general fund supported and go really towards the direct cost of providing that service as well. Next, we were asked to look at providing some marketing tools, and I'm happy to announce that we actually now have a new website dedicated to ADUs here in Oceanside. You'll see the website address there. It's oceansideadu.com. We're still building the website right now, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but right now you can go go to the website and pull some really helpful resources right now, and I'll talk a little bit about those. Key to what we've done so far is developing an informational video, which we just launched about a week ago. It's now on YouTube, and it's directly linked off the city's webpage. I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's about 7.5 minutes long. We've been here long enough, but I will play just kind of the beginning and then jump around to a couple of points in the video, which I think are really important in communicating the type of information. And I'll tell you, this sort of video here is actually pretty cutting edge. Not a lot of cities do these. We happen to connect with someone who could produce this for us, and we're really excited about it. We've received some positive feedback on it now, even though we haven't even publicized it.
Welcome to the City of Oceanside's informational video on how to build an accessory dwelling unit, also referred to as an ADU. In this video, we will provide tips on design requirements, permit reviews, and applicable fees. The City of Oceanside and the State of California encourage the construction of accessory dwelling units to increase housing opportunities throughout our community. Whether the ADU is rented to the public or used to house a family member, they're an efficient way to maximize the use of your property while helping to meet the city's housing needs. Let's start with defining what an accessory dwelling unit is. An accessory dwelling unit is an attached or detached residential unit that provides complete independent living accommodations for sleeping, living, eating, cooking, and sanitation.
I'm going to take one break there. So as you can see, it's a very graphic, kind of hands-on video, which is pretty neat. Again, not a lot of cities produce these sorts of videos, but we were able to do this. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to a certain spot that kind of gets to the point where you can really kind of see where this is of value to people here. Because it really does kind of walk you through some of the technical aspects in it in a visual. If you take a look at an ADU ordinance, a lot of times it's really difficult to translate because it's a lot of technical stuff, but here I'm going to jump here and just kind of show you what this video does to kind of help.
They must contain at least 350 square feet, but cannot exceed 50% of the square footage of the total living area for the primary home, or 1,200 square feet, whichever is less. The living area of the primary home cannot be reduced by more than 20% to accommodate an attached ADU. The second type is a detached ADU. These are ADUs that are structurally independent and detached from the primary home, not exceeding 1,200 square feet. The third type is an efficiency unit. An efficiency unit can be as small as 150 square feet and can be permitted as either an attached or detached ADU. It must have a bathroom facility and a partial kitchen with a kitchen sink, cooking equipment, and refrigerator. Finally, an existing attached or detached garage or accessory structure may be converted into an ADU, subject to compliance with applicable building and fire codes. If the existing
So again, I'm going to jump to one more point here, and I know I'm kind of geeking out a little bit here, but I'm really proud of this video. This next part is actually what I think is really the most helpful. Oops. I apologize for that. I think I cut myself off here. I'm going to jump ahead to one more point here, sorry, and then I'm going to get off the video here and move on with my presentation. Maybe I need a how-to video on how to control this mouse here.
Let's tackle the next big design consideration for ADUs, the zone standards. All buildings are required to provide certain distances from property lines. These are called setbacks. You must also consider how much total square footage of the property can be covered with a building, including existing and proposed buildings. This is called lot coverage. In addition, there are limits on the height of the buildings. Depending on your single-family zone, the setback, lot coverage, and height requirements may vary.
So anyway, I think that gives you a flavor, but it's a very informational video. It goes on to explain the permitting process. There's some discussion in this about fees and so forth, but it's a very kind of hands-on video. very graphic, and again, we've already received quite a bit of positive feedback on it. We haven't even started marketing this yet either, so, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in some of the upcoming slides. In addition to the video, we've also now developed a Q&A fact sheet that's also posted on the website. And in addition to that, we're going to be working on some other elements on there on the website. I'm going to talk a little bit about that on my final slide in terms of some of the things that are upcoming here. But the point is we have done quite a bit so far to work on these marketing tools. In terms of a marketing campaign, we plan on launching that by the end of May. One of the things that we wanted to do was just to refine the website a little bit more, make it a little bit more splashy and user-friendly, making sure that we were linking to as many resources as we can on the website. In terms of some of the additional stuff that we want to put up there, we want to put together a consolidated fee schedule that makes it kind of a very easy to follow fee schedule. Right now, of course, people that want to build have to rely on the city's building fee schedule, which has a lot of information on there. If we could just narrow that down to ADUs, I think that'll help solve a lot of questions. And then also we plan on developing a step-by-step guide that would essentially be similar to the video, but would just be a paper handout with flow charts and everything that, again, would just be able to explain the process much more clearly. In terms of marketing, what we intend to do once we get the website all polished up is to do some PR work with newspapers, local media. We're going to be working with KOCT. We've had some conversations with them in terms of getting our video that I just showed you up and running as well. And then we would also like to hold some community workshops over the summer as well, just to really get the word out and make those well publicized so that we can share all the information and resources that we have out there. Finally, I just wanted to kind of talk about some of the other North County cities are doing. I know that one of the issues, again, that we were asked to look at was potential fee waivers. I think as it stands right now, we also do quite a bit. I'll start with the very note at the bottom right now. You know, based on the calculations that I've made and looking at all the ADUs that we've permitted of late, at least since 2017, right now we waive about 96% of all development impact fees. There's only a couple of very small fees that we still collect, and that's just generally the general plan surcharge fee and the technology surcharge fee, which are pretty minimal. In terms of what other cities are doing in North County, I reached out to a number of North County cities. Vista is looking to waive all their development impact fees. That's something that's pending. They will still be collecting their permit and inspection fees, however. Solana Beach is looking to reduce 75% of their development impact fees for deed-restricted affordable units. They already do that, actually. Encinitas, as you know, I'm sure you've heard, they've done it all. They've waived all their city fees completely. And then Poway has a 50% reduction on development impact fees on all the ADUs. So that's kind of what our neighbors are doing. So that's kind of where we're at. Again, you know, we have some big things coming up here in terms of fine-tuning the web page. Again, making it more splashy, more user-friendly, posting a couple of more community resources up there, and then launching into a full marketing campaign over the summer to spread the news and hopefully generate some additional interest in ADU development here in our city. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Do we have any speakers?
We have one speaker on this item, Joel West.
Deputy Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I guess the last public speaker of the evening. I'm Joel West from Safe South O, and I'm coming to commend the staff for the decision that you made last year to limit the ADU's use for residents and not for short-term rentals. There seems to be no limit as to the number of one-size-fits-all mandates that come from Sacramento by legislators appearing to do something about affordable housing, of which SB 50 is one of the worst they've ever come up with, and I'm sure you'll be talking about that in the future. And so to show that Oceanside is meeting both the spirit and the letter of these mandates, it's crucial that when we're providing ordinances and policies to implement these mandates intended to increase the supply of affordable housing, that housing is going to create more places for people to live in Oceanside. And therefore, I commend you, whatever you end up doing on the STR ordinance, I know that's coming up in the future, but whatever you do on anything else, I just encourage you to be thinking about this at all times when we're responding to the state's mandates, to think about how do we respond to them in such a way that our implementation is not only meeting what they require us to do, but is also achieving the intent of these mandates, which is to get our affordable housing up and get our supply of housing up. Because otherwise, the state's just going to pass more and more draconian policies to pressure us to do it if they don't like the results we're producing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Jonathan, I only have one question, and I didn't hear anything about it. Maybe I'm not hearing as well. Parking. That is a concern for a lot of neighborhoods. I mean, even though there's people living in places where there are a lot of people living in them, but and so the parking is affected by that. If do we have parking in any part of this process?
Yeah, so that in 2017, that last piece of legislation actually preempted much local control over how much parking you can require. And, you know, in many instances, the city cannot require additional parking for an ADU, including if it's within a half mile of a transit route, and a lot of homes are within a half mile of a transit route. So in many instances, we are precluded, but generally, as a minimum standard, we do require one space per unit, which would be our standard. But in many cases, we're preempted from the law from actually requiring anything above that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez.
I am so impressed with this program. I'm very excited for the future of Oceanside and relieving some of the state pressures on the housing units. Quick question, if you can clarify for the council and members of the audience, the difference on the deed restriction. So if you just build an ADU, you have it in your backyard, you do what you want with it, great. I mean, with the exception of short-term vacation rental. Can you explain the difference between as far as benefit and unit counts as a city from not having a deed restriction and having a deed restriction? Yeah,
so that's a good question, actually, and it's kind of a gray area in state law, to be honest with you. There's not a lot of definition as to, you know, and the question often comes up, how do ADUs get counted towards our reallocation, right? As a matter of fact, we had a meeting today with our own housing staff to kind of talk about that on a move-forward basis, and we think that just by virtue of the size of the unit and the number of occupants in a unit, we can kind of make a determination that it fits into a certain category, and many times we believe that we could actually count these towards meeting our low-income housing obligation just by the number of tenants that typically would reside in one of these units and the size as well.
Okay, so and again, I would have to defer to the city attorney and maybe future due diligence. Is from my understanding, in order for them to count toward low income, there has to be a deed restriction placed, and so I just don't want to not have that as a part of our process. And not that it's a requirement for everyone, but if we miss that and at some point we say, hey, we can't count these now, again, the owner should be given that option.
There's typically a regulatory agreement between the city, our housing division, and the property owner that we generally bring to council for approval in order to count those units. I could consult with Mr. Borrego on this issue, though.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. With respect to the waiving of fees, I do see that we're almost at 100% of our development impact. You know, from a business perspective, we see the numbers increasing, and we're spending a lot of time and money to getting this out there. I don't see it as being necessary as waiving our inspection in those sort of dynamic fees. I think we're going to need that going into this, and depending on the amount of units we have come through, we may have to outsource some things. So we're going to need as much money for our city as possible. But if we were to look at some point waiving part of that 10,000, how how do I ask this? So the school district fee that's paid on an ADU, is there anything that can be done with that? Or how has that been looked at as far as, you know, an attached ADU, a detached ADU remodel? I mean, is that something that has to be paid? Or is there, you know, kind of a gray area with that, with the school district?
You know, I know that even, you know, all cities that are doing this are actually still collecting that, fee. However, I did actually, interestingly on that subject, I was doing some additional research today, as a matter of fact, and I thought I saw something that said that the city of Encinitas is actually looking at having school district fees waived, which really struck me as odd too, because obviously it's not collected by the city, it's collected by the school district. So whether they worked out some sort of a side agreement with the school district to make them whole in that regard, I'm not sure. Certainly could look more into that, but I'd never heard of any cities waiving school district fees before.
Got it. Okay. My last question you kind of hit on with the workshops. I think that's going to be huge for the hands-on constituents or homeowners in Oceanside that, look, I want to show up, I want to see that video, and I want contractors on one side of the room that can help me, I can talk to, and then lenders on the other. Mm-hmm. And so that leads to my next point. At some point, will staff consider, I don't know how this works. I know with, on my farm, we have to do a reverse flow inspection every year, and there's this whole list of like 100 plumbers we can call, you know, so you definitely provide a list of vendors. Is that something that we may be able to do for the lending side of this, which is very important, also the contractor side of it?
Yeah, and we can look at doing something like that. I know we as staff generally have to be very careful and can't directly refer people to,
correct,
you know, businesses, so to speak. But certainly, you know, there could be opportunities to partner with you know, on a broader scale with, you know, and I know some communities do that, because I was actually looking at some of those as well that other communities have done, and there are actually advocacy groups out there that promote ADUs, and some of those are sponsored by ADU builders themselves, but those workshops do happen out there, and certainly if we can do that and not, you know, get ourselves into
correct,
hot water,
yeah,
then absolutely I'd be open to doing that.
Perfect. All right. No further comments.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody? Thank you, Jonathan. Mm-hmm. Well, any comments? Anything for the greater good? Not even Esther. We're adjourned.